Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Ask the Expert. My name is Ashley Baldwin from the Department of Communications at the Pan American Health Organization here in Washington, D.C. And today we're going to be talking to three of my colleagues about the use of masks in the context of COVID-19, principally the do's and don'ts about mask use. So I'm joined here today by Dr. João Toledo, who's our advisor in clinical management of infectious diseases. Hi, João. You need to unmute your mic. There we go.
Hi, Ashley. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm also joined by Dr. Valiska Stempliuk, who is the advisor in health surveillance, disease prevention and control. Hi, Valiska.
Hi, Ashley. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And finally, I'm also joined by Dr. Alexandre Lemgruber, the advisor in health technologies management here at the Pan American Health Organization. So to start off, hi, sorry, I didn't give you time to speak. To start off, when we talk about medical masks, when we talk about the use of masks at all with COVID-19, what is the difference between medical masks, respirators? We've heard people talk about a lot about these, is it N95 masks? What's the difference between each one, and when should each one be used?
Thanks, Ashley, for the question. I think I'll start for the warm-up, and then I'll hand over to Valeska for some more detail on the use of masks. No, this question is very pertinent because whenever we are discussing use of masks in the context of COVID-19, people try to mix some of the concepts, medical masks, no medical masks. So for no medical masks are those masks made with cloth. We know these as no medical masks and cloth masks, and these are those masks that can be homemade. On the other hand, we have medical masks, and these are basically what we have here in terms of respirators or N95. We can have respirators like this, and we have the surgical mask. Each of these masks, either respirators or surgical masks, they have a specific technical regulatory technical aspects, and they also have some specific uses, and I'll hand over to Valeska to bring some light on this issue of medical masks. Over.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Ashley, for the question, and João for the explanation. So as he mentioned, the medical mask we recommend for the healthcare workers. So we have two different types. One is the medical or surgical mask that is recommended for general care of patients with COVID or respiratory symptoms. And you have the N95 that we are recommending or suggesting the use for healthcare workers performing what we call aerosol generated procedures. That means very specific procedures inside of the treatment of the patient. So these are not for use in the community level. At the community level, what is recommended is the cloth mask in general. However, if you are in a high-risk group, over 65, or you have underlying disease, you should consider also use a surgical mask because the level of protection is higher than the cloth mask. So for community in general, cloth mask give you with the hand hygiene and physical distance protection against getting infected with COVID-19. However, if you are group risk, over 65 or underlying diseases, you should wear medical mask. Those are, in general, the recommendations that we'll have opportunity to discuss a little bit further during this section. Over.
Thank you, both of you. So just to reiterate, when we're looking at masks, we're looking really at the levels of filtration that each masks provide. Correct me if I'm wrong. So with the respirator masks, the N95, that will really provide sort of the level of filtration that's required for someone who's working in for example, an ICU and is intubating patients that could potentially have COVID-19. Then I guess is the next step down, which is the medical mask, which is also the mask that's recommended for use for health workers who aren't doing those things, but are still working in high risk environments. And then the cloth masks, what sort of level of filtration will that provide? So we talk a lot about droplet transmission of COVID-19. So is the design of the cloth masks to prevent that droplet transmission from when someone coughs or sneezes? How exactly does that work when it comes to the general members of the public?
So thank you very much, Ashley, for this question, because I think we need to clarify one of the main aspects of the masks. And here we have our colleague, Alexandre, that can provide a little bit of explanation in terms of the technical specification for these masks. No, what I have here, I have a surgical mask and also N95, and I don't know if you are able to see this, but these masks, they have like at least 3 layers of a tissue, and this is
Lift it up a little bit for us, Joel. Yeah, there we go.
This is an N95, and it has like at minimum 3 layers of filtering tissue, that follows specific recommendations. The same technical specifications, the same for the surgical mask, and before entering into the details of COVID being transmitted by droplet or droplet nuclei, as Valeska mentioned, the surgical mask works whenever we are dealing with any disease transmitted by droplet, and on the other hand, the respirator works for those diseases which the transmission is based on droplet nuclei, because these droplet nuclei or aerosols are smaller particles, and the main objective of these filtering layers of the respirator is to detain these small particles. And as Valeska mentioned, in healthcare facilities, whenever a healthcare provider is performing any sort of aerosol generating procedure, this healthcare provider should wear the respirator. Over.
Thank you very much for clarifying. We've started to get a few questions that have come in from our audience, but they're not specifically related to mask use. So I'm going to hold off for a minute and go through my questions, because I still want to find out a lot more about this. But I will just ask that if anyone has a question that's specifically related to the use of masks, which masks to use, when to use them, etc., then by all means put them in the comments section to the side, and we'll ask the experts during this Facebook Live. But if the questions have to do with any other aspects of COVID-19, what we'll probably do is hold off and wait for when we have the specific thematic ask the expert to address those questions. So we mentioned that when it comes to the general public, when it comes to people that are asymptomatic or I guess pre-symptomatic even, we're encouraging the use of cloth masks. So I know, for example, here in Washington, DC, in order to go to the supermarkets, you have to wear a cloth mask or some type of mask. Whenever you go in to pick up takeout or something that you've ordered, it's the same thing. But I think it was you that mentioned, Joao, about people that have respiratory symptoms. So in that particular case, say, for example, one of my family members that I live with has respiratory symptoms. What sort of mask should I be wearing? And what sort of mask should they be wearing in order to prevent transmission from someone that I may be in a bit closer contact with?
So this is relates to a concept that Valeska has already highlighted, and I think I saw a comment on also on the chat. No, masks by themselves, they are not they don't have enough protection to lay individuals or even to healthcare providers. No, the use of masks should be seen alongside with other measures like cough etiquette and also hand hygiene and the rational use of personal protective equipment. Whenever a symptomatic individual with signs and symptoms of acute respiratory illness, or in this acute respiratory illness can be COVID-19, seeks for assistance on a healthcare facility, this individual should be offered medical mask, and it's surgical mask. No, I think that Valeska has some information to aggregate on this discussion of the symptomatic individual. So I'll hand over to Valeska.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, so if you are taking care of somebody in your house that you know that has COVID, so the recommendation will be wear a surgical mask. The cloth mask is recommended for, the community transportation or at the place that you cannot keep 1 meter of distance from another person, then you wear these cloth masks. But if you are dealing with a sick person or if you are sick yourself, the recommendation is to wear the medical mask. And this mostly because, as João mentioned, the medical mask, it's, have specific technical specifications that prove the level of protection that it's have. And now, so it's a medical equipment, so we can guarantee, or the specifications guarantee that the level of protection. So this is the so that's why we recommend for sick persons or taking care of sick wearing medical mask.
Thank you. Thank you very much for clarifying. So we've just had a couple of related questions come in. So Freddy Salazar has said, to run errands like going to the supermarket, would the cloth mask be enough? And we're saying that yes, it would be. But we've had another quite interesting question come in from Ana Carolina Leite, who said, I'm working at a bank. Is it better for me to use a cloth mask or a surgical mask? So I guess we have people who are running their, going about their daily business, running errands, popping in and out of these high-risk places. But what about the people who work in supermarkets or I guess in public-facing positions quite a bit and are probably more likely to be coming in close contact with a variety of people? Would our recommendations still be for the use of cloth masks?
Yeah, so I can start this time and then João can jump over. So yes, the recommendation is a cloth mask in the community situation, even if you are a worker. However, as João mentioned, we have to think that surgical mask is one of the group of measures that you have to put in place together. So physical distance, more than 1 meter, and hand hygiene are 2 other very important measures that can bring the safety that you need for your daily activities. So if you're working in a bank, of course, what we're asking is, the tables have enough space between one and another workers. And if somebody's coming to see you close, you can see it in many supermarkets, right? You have a physical barrier that, prevent people to, or not people, the droplets to come from the other people to you. And if you have to touch money, after you touch or do the exchange that you need to do, you can, clean your hand with hand sanitizer. If it's not possible, wash hands and wash hands frequently. So it's not one measure you save all the situations, but if you put it all together and think about how you can better protect you, then we will be able to be protected wearing a cloth mask. As well, it's very important to wash hands before you wear your mask and after you remove your mask, and then laundering it very frequently every day if it's possible. So you need to have more than one cloth mask to be able, to follow and be safe wearing your mask.
And just to interject as well, when we talk about hand hygiene, we're referring to washing hands with the alcohol gel or with soap and water for 30 seconds. And we have videos online about how exactly that can be done. And when we talk about cough etiquette, we're referring to if we need to sneeze or cough, we cough into a disposable handkerchief that we then immediately discard. And if we don't have one available, we cough into the middle of our elbow, just so that everyone else is protected from us. We have been reiterating this throughout our Ask the Experts, but I just thought I'd, carry on beating it over the head a little bit. You mentioned, Valeska, that so cloth masks ideally should be laundered every day. But when it comes to medical masks or the respirators, can these be reused? I mean, there's been lots of sort of media coverage over shortage of PPE, which of course includes masks, and particularly those kinds of masks that are needed by frontline health workers. So how can we, I guess, extend the life of those products as much as possible? And will they still be functioning, if I use a respirator mask from one day to the next? How frequently does that stuff need to be turned over?
This was for Valeska, but I'll start and then I'll I'll hand over to Valeska. So this question is interesting because in today's session earlier this morning, we had some sort of questions in terms of the reuse or the extended use of personal protective equipments, but with the focus on the medical masks. No, so the first concept here, and that most of the times people are trying to look for magical numbers in terms of the lifetime of medical mask. No, we don't have this this ideal number, but we know that for surgical masks, for example, and I think the first key message, like a take-home message, is that both surgical mask and respirators, sorry, are of single use, for unique use, which means that if I am a healthcare provider, I need to have my surgical mask, no, or my respirator. There are some studies showing that after 6 hours, these medical masks start to losing its efficacy in filtering the particles. No, so we as healthcare workers are starting to become more prone to get infected by COVID-19 or any other disease. No, this is the first concept. The second concept is the concept of extended use of the respirators and surgical masks, and also the reuse. No, there are a couple of studies showing some sort of results in terms of these technologies in reusing this medical equipment, but a lot of concepts need to be taken into account in terms of the availability of this technology in countries, and also how to perform. I think Valeska has more property than me to address these questions of the reuse of medical masks. Over.
Valeska, just before you answer as well, I heard that Joel mentioned that, so we're talking about single-use items when we refer to medical masks and the N95 masks. But what exactly does that mean? Does that mean that I have to change them after this 6-hour time period when they become less effective? Or are these things, if I'm a nurse, for example, or a doctor working on the front lines, are these things that I need to change between patients? like the medical gloves.
Okay, so what it means strictly in outside of the pandemic moment that we are is the recommendation is if you're healthcare workers, we take care of one patient. When you leave the room or leave the bed, you remove your PPE, including your mask or your respirator, and then the next contact you wear everything new or clean, right? So the gowns can be clean, but the mask will be new one. Now that we are having this situation that you are short in, respirator or mask or even other PPEs, WHO issue a recommendation that we call extended use of mask and respirators, and that take in account that you can use the same mask or respirators for 6 hours, up to 6 hours, without change between patients. So this is already a change in the concept that we have previously because of this situation of pandemic and then the grades needed for these PPE. So this is the new recommendation or the updated recommendation that we call extended use. Another thing is about the reuse. That means you use it and then you wash it or you sterilize it and then you reuse it back. So for surgical mask, there is no reuse. We cannot wash it and then use it again. This recommendation was not issued. There is no evidence that we can do it properly and keep safe the PPE, the mask. For respirators, what we have is there are some papers or some publications that show that you can do it effectively. However, as João mentioned, usually the hospital need to have a technology for sterilization at low temperature because the masks are mostly fibers and polymers that can sometimes cannot resist to high temperature. And also you have to have a process that allowed you to safely send the mask or the respirator to be sterilized, and this respirator need to come back for the same healthcare worker. And since maybe for us who are outside of the hospital is to do, but in local, in the hospital, it's very difficult to implement this process. So it's possible to do, but it's need to have the correct technology and also the process implemented to be able to, track the respirator to the sterilization department and then back to the same healthcare worker. So that are the difference. Respirators, yes, you can do with strict process, and masks, surgical mask, you cannot reprocess, just extended use for 6 hours.
Ashley, if I may, as I know that
Of course,
have been very concentrated on the use, and this is very natural. That's everybody's concerned about how to best use and what to do, what to do not do. But I just want to share a few comments about I think the important ones. Before that, I just put in the chat the link for the document on the reuse and reprocessing of respirators. I think it is very useful information. You can access there, and some of the issues that mentioned by João and Valesca are mentioned there, and of course in more details because we don't have time to explore all the document here. Everybody can access this document that we provide the link. Regarding the masks, the medical mask and the respirators, and of course the rational uses is a key element, but another key element it's the quality and the performance of those masks and those respirators. No? So and I know that usually so the general population do not buy directly those products because the recommendation is that those should be reserved for healthcare workers. But we may have healthcare professionals here in our audience, and also from people from Ministry of Health and from hospitals. They want to purchase those masks or those respirators, and they were concerned about the quality of those products. So I think it's important to mention and emphasize the regulatory aspects that are related to those devices.
So not all of these devices are created equal then?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Not all of these devices are created equal. So if I'm, for example, a Ministry of Health or a healthcare provider, and I go and buy a supply of medical masks or a supply of respirators for my staff, I'm not necessarily going to be getting the same thing from provider to provider then.
Exactly. So
okay.
that's exactly that helped me a lot in your comment, because this is exactly why we have to develop standards and specifications for those devices. No? So I also share in the chat, there's another link which give you access to the list of priority medical devices in the context of COVID-19. And all the devices that are important in this context, so you can find information on ventilators and other equipment, but there's one specific session on PPE and personal protective equipment. And so there you can see all the specifications and all the most important quality standards that are expected to be fulfilled by the both devices we're discussing today, so medical masks and respirators. No, I will not be going into many details about all the tests, because I think it's just very, very technical information right now, but there's several of tests that are performed. Just example, the sodium chloride aerosol challenge, to see tests about the leakage, to see the fit tests and if there's any leakage. So there's several tests, and for each of those tests, there is developed a standard. There are several entities around the world that are qualified for doing those tests, performing those tests in this equipment. And I want to emphasize the very important role of the regulatory authorities, the national regulatory authorities. So lots of people ask me about, but how do I know if one product is good quality or not? So I also mentioned, of course, we have several resources in our website that can help you looking for information. But very important is to contact and access the website of the regulatory authority of your country. I will in a few minutes provide another link. I think it would be very useful. That's a document that basically is a kind of, we try to put together all the resources that we found in those regulatory authorities and websites. So you can find for each of the devices, and then there is a special chapter for the PPEs. You can see what the regulatory authorities in the region and also outside the region are providing in terms of the information. Because we are, of course, in a context there is a shortage of those devices. This is for sure. So we know that we're facing a very important challenge. So regulatory authorities are it's a very they have to see how they have to decide how can we regulate properly the quality and performance of those products, guaranteeing the safety of the population, but on the other hand, making sure that we can have the products available for the population. So that's why the regulatory authority developed an emergency criteria for authorizing those devices, so they can be in the market quickly than in the normal times, but we can still trust in the quality of those products. We know that there's lots of falsified products in the market, so we know that. So it's very important that you make sure that you contacted the regulatory authority and look at information in the label that has, and I can talk later in our conversation about what kind of information should be looking at. But it's important that this device is authorized by the regulatory authority to be commercialized, to be marketed in the country.
Great. Thank you so much for bringing up that point. And just to emphasize, when we talk about the people or the entities that will be making these purchases, we mean the health systems, healthcare providers. We don't mean members of the general public, and that these healthcare providers should be consulting with national level regulatory authorities to make sure that what they're buying isn't this falsified equipment that you were mentioning. So we'll certainly come back to that, because I have a few more questions about that. But I've noticed that we're getting quite a lot of questions about cloth masks from members of the public. So we have a question from Jesus Eduardo Escobar, who's asked whether there's, so we're purchasing our cloth masks. We can get them from the internet, we can get them from, even supermarkets are selling them now here. But how can I guarantee that that's really going to provide me with, the maximum amount of protection that I need as a member of the public who's going to be out and about visiting supermarkets, what have you? Should I be using some kind of filter? Should I be impregnating my mask with antibacterial gel? Is there something that I can be doing to these masks that I buy in order to make them a bit more effective?
So thank you very much, Ashley, for this question. No, this question is very important because before entering to the details of the cloth mask, I think another take-home message for our audience today is that a mask won't be more effective than the other if I impregnate, for example, a surgical mask with alcohol solution or with chlorine. No, in fact, this impregnation might be very toxic because it will release the steams. No, and the individuals can inhale these toxic gases and they will become intoxicated. No, so this is common sense that impregnating a surgical mask or a cloth mask or a respirator with alcohol or chlorine, this will make myself feel more safe in terms of protection. No, in terms of the cloth masks, it's important that these masks, as these industrial masks, that they have 3 layers, because these layers will be able to filter, and to filter the air that I'm having contact with. But most important, that wearing a cloth mask, it's to reinforce the concept that Valeska already mentioned, in terms that the use of mask is part of a package, which includes cloth etiquette, hand hygiene that you have already reinforced, social distance, and also risk approach for healthcare workers, because Alexandre mentioned that we are facing a lot of counterfeits in the market in terms of masks, and we are facing a shortage of these medical supplies. So we need to secure that healthcare providers have surgical masks or respirators, and also focus on the triage of symptomatic individuals and the use of medical mask. Over.
Ashley,
Okay, of course, yeah, go for it.
So yeah, so as João mentioned, so 3 layers, and what we know about the availability, capacity of the cloth, different cloths to filter, is that they can be quite different from one type to another. So the recommendation of 3 layers come together with the rationale that if you have extra layers, will be more protected. And also the suggestion is have 3 layers of different materials. So cotton and nylon, or no, but important as well is make sure that you are able to breathe through the mask, because it's not like I will put 10 layers and then I will have the best mask ever, but I cannot breathe. Because for the medical masks, this is one of the parameters that is considered in the technical specifications. However, with the cloth masks, we don't have this. So when you are buying or making your own mask, make sure that you do this balance between the protection and also, of course, the capacity that you have to breathe through the mask. And also the other recommendation is maybe the more absorbent or more soft to the contact be the layer that is getting contact with your face, because to avoid, you know, it's long period of time and long exposure, to avoid any kind of skin irritation or something like that.
Thank you. Thank you both for clarifying. So Joel, just to go over one of the points that I think you mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, the use of cloth masks among members of the public do not compensate for us abiding by the other public health measures like physical, you know, it's no good me putting on my cloth mask and going to the club and having a few drinks with, you know, 10 of my friends that I haven't been socially isolating with. Wearing a mask doesn't mean that I don't have to practice hand hygiene. So I wonder if you could just go over a little bit more the importance of being aware that a mask is one of several recommended public health measures that we need to all be implementing in order to stop the spread of COVID-19.
No, thank you very much, Ashley. And I think also this is important to reinforce this concept. Know that, and whenever we are doing our trainings for the rational use of personal protective equipment, we ask the participants to wear a mask while they are attending the training. No, and after half an hour, it becomes unbearable to pay attention on the training wearing a mask, no, because we put the mask on the face and then we want to adjust, we want to sneeze, we want to talk, we want to touch our face, no. So wearing a mask, by wearing a mask, there's no purpose. No, we need to wear a mask knowing that if I am a healthcare worker, I need to wear a mask according to the activity I'm going to perform, whether it's be taking care of a patient or performing an aerosol generating procedure. And this is part of it's one of the personal protective equipment. No, we need to besides wearing a mask, performing hand hygiene whenever touching the patient, its surroundings, if we are going to collect any blood sample, for example, and whenever we are discarding this mask, no, because this mask is potentially contaminated, we also need to perform hand hygiene, either with alcohol-based solution or with water and soap. And what you mentioned as public health measures, broadly speaking, lies on the concept of non-pharmaceutical interventions in the response of COVID-19, which includes, and Valeska also mentioned this, the social distance, the isolation, and also the proper use of personal protective equipment by the healthcare workers and also the community.
Thank you very much, Joel. We're starting to get a few more questions come in, but before we address those, I just wanted to circle back to a couple of things that Alexandra was talking about. So in a context where healthcare providers are most likely going to be purchasing a lot more PPEs than would normally be the case, and we know the market is flooded at the moment with counterfeit equipment, et cetera, but I guess there's still, you know, the desperation to make sure that you have everything for the healthcare workers in your particular hospital or clinic to be protected. What information should healthcare systems, should people in charge of purchasing equipment for healthcare systems be making sure that they're getting from a supplier before they make a purchase? You know, just in case they're feeling a bit daunted about going through all of the various regulations, is there sort of some basic things that they need to keep in mind?
Thank you for the question. So it's very important. So let me talk about the main points here. First, and I think I mentioned this before, it's regulatory compliance. it's important that the products complies with the national regulation. So that's why important to in each country has different requirements, but it's important that first it's complies with the manufacturing country and complies with the country of destination, so the country that you are purchasing the device. Also, this is very important. A proof of compliance with the standards that I mentioned. So I didn't have time to talk about the standards themselves, but we can mention the US standard, for example, for respirators is the NIOSH standard, just for the N95 respirators, the European standards for FFP2, which are equivalent so another it's respirator, but it's equivalent to N95, but it's a European standard. So the origin of the product, I think it's important to emphasize the origin of the country is not, there's no relation with the quality of the product. So it could be for different countries, and of the same country can produce good masks, good quality masks and bad quality masks. So that's why it's important to comply with the standards that are appropriate for each device. And this is information is in the document that I mentioned before, which is the specifications and the quality standards, quality requirements for those devices. So there's a proof of compliance with those technical specifications. And of course, this is not easy. I'm not saying that is easy. So it's if someone that's someone to be I mean in the big hospital and on the Ministry of Health, so they are accustomed to those purchases, so they will be easier for them to but maybe it's not so easy for maybe a small hospital or to check all the certificates. So that's why it's important to rely on the regulatory authority, because sometimes it's very difficult to check at this right moment. We have our team checking all the information for the purchase that we do through the PAHO does, and for the countries and the PPEs that are going to several countries in the region. We are receiving information about those providers, and we have to check. And as our colleagues are specialized in quality assurance, they are checking the certificates to see if they are trustable certificates. So it's not an easy task, because there's lots of false, fake certificates right now. So that's why it's important to check with the regulatory authority. Another thing that's important is the ISO standards for the production, because one thing is the standards for the product itself. The other thing is the quality standards for the manufacturer. So we have to make sure, because we have several companies that are starting producing they see this as an opportunity, a market opportunity. So they are started producing those masks, and they never did this before. I mean, it's okay if they comply with the standards. And one important standard is ISO 13485. That's a quality management system. So this information, I know it's very technical, and I'm sorry if I'm being so very detailed, but those are, you asked me about which important information should they be looking for. And those are the information, those are the list in the documents. And if there's any doubt, you can contact the regulatory authority, and you can contact the PAHO office in the country. And of course, the PAHO office can contact us, a regional office, and we can help in this. So I think that's answered.
It's not too technical at all. We have a very broad audience listening at the moment, so I think we're covering all of our bases. And it's interesting what you mentioned about we're hearing a lot about, a factory that was producing one thing has now started making PPE. So I think it is quite interesting that, as well as the people that are purchasing PPEs at levels that are fairly unprecedented, I would assume in most cases, need to be consulting with the regulatory authorities. But of course, these businesses that are now adapting to the production of medical equipment that perhaps they have absolutely no experience in, also make sure that their products are abiding by these quality standards, so that it just facilitates the whole purchase chain. And just to let everyone know that the documents that we've been speaking about when it comes to quality control of medical devices, we've put them all in the comments section on the Facebook post, so you can access them there. And of course, they're also available on PAHO's website. We just have a couple of final questions that have come through. One of them, I think, Valeska, is probably for you, because it sort of, it refers to one of the points that you made about sterilization and reusing medical masks, the N95 masks, I think specifically. And you said that not all hospitals and clinics have this capability. And Tatiana Martinez Lozano has asked, given that in her country they don't have this capability to sterilize N95 masks, but of course there's a shortage, is there any other technique that can be used? Can you steam them, for example?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, no. So right now, what has been used and proven as efficient to do that, we have 3 technologies, right? Or 4 technologies, three products. Steam of hydrogen peroxide, plasma of hydrogen peroxide, UV light, and steam, and high pressure steam, that is the autoclave. However, for example, for the autoclave, the cycle is a little bit lower, the temperature. And also what we see in these publications, they show that not all the respirators can be sterilized, because one important aspect of the respirators, for example, that they can, really seal here in the face to be able to perform well, because the air need to pass through the respirators, not for holes or, so need to fit well. And then what's happening when you sterilize it, they lose the shape, so do not fit well anymore. So it doesn't work after you sterilize. So the recommendation for her or for other person will be, first, see if the national regulatory authorities are in agreement with this reprocessing process. And then after, have to test in your hospital with the brand that you have to see if you will be able to recover the mask the respirator fitting well, and put in place the process and all the controls. So it's, as I mentioned before, it's not an easy and not cheap process, this one of reprocessing. From the experience that we know, people say that long use of the mask or the respirator, extended use like 6 hours, seems to be more feasible and also cheaper than reprocessing of the respirators.
Thank you very much. And we've had a couple of questions that have come in related to children. And the first one is, should children be wearing masks when they go into the supermarket or when they have contact with various people? I know that in some countries, some students have started going back to school, for example, with masks. And secondly, Carla Paulina has asked, what solutions can be used to sterilize these cloth masks? Should we just be putting them in the wash with normal laundry detergent, or should we be using something else? She's a science teacher and also a scout, so is responsible for a lot of children and is quite keen for this information.
May I start with the last point, and then we can take to João, and then João and answer about the children. So about the cleaning of the cloth mask. So the cloth mask should be seen as a tissue, cloth tissue. After you use it, you wash it, right? So it's a used tissue when we remove, because it's close to your mouth, you speak, you breathe on that. So it's humid with secretion. So the recommendation is, after each use, you can should laundry or wash it. What we know about the susceptibility of this virus to disinfectants, detergents, and soap, it's a weak one to be killed. So if you, with the normal process that you have in your house, if you put together with to laundry with your clothes, will be safe to you to use it after drying, of course, but will be safe to you to use it again. So no special process is needed to kill this specific virus on the mask, because also the mask should be, my mask should be my mask, right? We're not asking people to exchange, even inside the same house, exchange the masks. However, people need to have more than one to be able to laundry it or wash it and then dry, have enough time to dry and wear a new mask. So more or less like not everybody wear cloth tissue, but more or less the same, but is a used one when you get home from after hours wearing the mask. So about the kids, I think João can amplify.
Thank you very much, Valesca, Ashley. Thank you, Dr. Villar, for the question. No, we as medical doctors, when we are in the medical school, we always learn that a child is not an adult in miniature. So whatever we discuss for adults might not specifically work for children. We know that in this field of the medical masks and the use of medical masks by children, we have a few studies on this matter. We also take part of a broad group with WHO discussing this agenda of the use of medical masks by children. And we also know that the market has a shortage of these medical masks for children, no? Because if we take a look on surgical mask like this is almost the shape of a face of a child, no? So the child might not be able to adequately breathe. So I think that more important that providing masks for children is to educate children on hand hygiene, social distance, and also this education, no, in terms of what works and what doesn't work in terms of infection prevention control measures. Over.
Thank you very much, João. And just before we go, we've just had a follow-up question for you, Valesca. So when it comes to cloth masks, when do I need to throw it away? How long will they last? Or is it just, like a t-shirt, it's going to last until it doesn't last anymore? It starts to, I guess, disintegrate.
Oh, that's a very tough question. So thank you for this thought. So the reality is we don't have a lot of information about the filtering capacity of the different cloths, right? So what we know is that some kind, or for example, nylon is better than cotton, but we don't know exactly. So the range, not that we don't know, sorry. The range is very, very large. So I don't know. I don't know if it's after use 10 times, the cloth mask will be less effective than a new one. So, but what I can think as expert in this topic, that the mask should, be fit in your face. So if the hanger are like loose, and then you have a lot of air coming through other parts of the mask, that's maybe the time for you throw away. But I don't know exactly how long that will last. And I think that it depends on the material that it's done.
João?
Yes, because I see a question here on the chat from Dr. Marcio Alan in terms of the use of personal protective equipment by primary healthcare workers. And I will also include on the chat a document with the rational use of personal protective equipment and according to the profession. But basically, and stepping ahead of you, Ashley, health,
It's okay, Joao. I'm not offended. It's fine.
primary healthcare workers, they should wear surgical masks, you know, whenever they are taking assessing vital signs of patients or performing any regular activities. On the other hand, if they are performing any kind of aerosol generating procedure, as Valeska mentioned, it's the respirator. But I'll include the document on the chat on a second. Over.
Just to complement the information, the document that we mentioned before on the list of priority medical devices in the context of COVID-19, it has the device organized according to the level of care. So I think it's very useful. You can see the level of care and see which are the devices are recommended for each one. I think it's well organized that way.
Brilliant. So our audience has a lot of reading to do after this Ask the Experts, but we're going to end here for now. We'll be back next week, same time, to discuss another aspect of the COVID-19 pandemic. I wanted to thank Valeska, Joao, and Alexandre for joining me today. And this is the second one that they're doing. I know that they did this already in Spanish this morning, so you need a well-deserved rest. But thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining. And we'll be back next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.